Namaste and welcome to another edition of the Bharatvaarta Weekly. This is weekly 128. I am Roshan Karyappa. I have with me Nirav Kanodra and Abhishek Paul to run you through the news and events of the week that was. And it's been a pretty busy week, I should say. We had the world's biggest aviation deal with Air India purchasing 470 aircrafts from Boeing and Airbus. Then China plans to expand its railway network across Aksai Chin. Billionaire George Soros had a few controversial statements about India and Prime Minister Modi. The Electoral Commission announced a decision on Shiv Sena and the future of the party name at least. Then there were IT raids at the BBC offices in India and so on. All of this and more on this weekly. If this is your first time here, we publish podcasts on politics, policy and culture every week. And if you are a returning visitor, please rate and review us so more people can discover us. All right. Hey Nirav, hey Abhishek, how's it going?
All good, all good.
Nirav, I think you have to say something different this weekly at least. Yeah.
It's a bit like the poha and coffee, yeah.
Bit like the poha and coffee. Yeah, but are you guys excited about the second test match at least?
Yeah, it's going on. Hopefully, like we should win this 4-0, otherwise, like I'll be disappointed. But yeah,
Yeah, hopefully, as I said, as a 90s cricket fan, I don't expect matches to be even and all of that, right? I mean, I am happy with us whitewashing opponent teams for sure, right? Yeah. Anyway, let's get to it. On February 14th, Air India announced that it is purchasing 470 aircrafts from Boeing and Airbus. The value of this deal is estimated at around $80 billion. The deal also includes the option to buy 370 more planes before the end of the decade, bringing the total up to 840 planes. US President Joe Biden, France's President Emmanuel Macron, and UK's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak all hailed the deal as a major job creator and a huge contributor to the economies. Well, there's a first. So, Nirav, what do you make of this?
but also, see, this is absolutely great. What this has done is, in the recent years, so first thing, where is the demand for this 470 planes, right? So first thing is you've got India had about 70 airports pre to 2014. Now it's gone to 170 airports. So there's a lot more domestic travel, right? Bulk of this has been taken over by actually Indigo. Air India had given a lot of orders in 2005 when Praful Patel was the aviation minister. Maybe a lot has been said about that, but probably wasn't really well managed. Second thing is a lot of Indians are traveling abroad, and a lot of that business has been taken over by the Middle Eastern airlines. So, Emirates, Etihad, Qatar Airways, what they have is a hub and spoke model. That they have their hub, say for Emirates, is in Dubai. Dubai has flights to all major Indian cities, and then from Dubai, they have flights to all major European and American cities, right? So, if Air India buys a lot more of the bigger aircraft for long haul flights, we can have direct flights from India itself going to all major US and European cities, taking away this demand what these guys had captured. So we already have a lot of demand. This is there. Second, whichever side of whatever spectrum you are on, Air India earlier under as a PSU was not very well managed. It was a loss-making entity. It had a lot of debt, and now what has happened is when government has privatized it, a lot of debt was taken over by the government, but the Tatas did take in. They promised to inject more capital. See, that is very important, and that is what they have done. So, what Tata, as a big conglomerate and having like a cash cow like TCS, has a very strong balance sheet, so they can sign a lot of these aircraft leases, which usually they borrow against the aircraft itself. So hypothetically, if the company defaults, they seize the aircraft first. So this is a good thing, and so they have the capacity to invest. And now when they have the capacity to invest, they can win back market share, provides better services for Indian residents and citizens, and people also from overseas traveling to India, right? And finally, like if Air India can become like a premium airline, so now they'll merge Vistara and Air India. If Air India becomes a premium airline from like let's call it like a not very well run airline, etc. It's not the first choice which comes to people's minds. If it does that, there's a huge market. I think it can be a premium airline which can fly long haul. There are a lot of people traveling overseas. There are a lot of foreigners coming to India. India this year, though it will be too late, India is hosting the G20. So I think there's a lot of good things there. This also creates a lot of domestic jobs. And finally, with all the political leaders, so US, Biden, Macron from France, Rishi Sunak from the UK, actually thanking India, creating jobs. So India used to be like a poor country, irrelevant, etc. Now I think India, as an aggregate, is a rich country. It's full of poor people, but as an aggregate, India is a rich country. So India has a lot of, you would call it like geopolitical heft and or geo-economic heft. So by having the ability to give such large orders, you also have some sort of a small veto or at least influence on other decisions of the other countries, right? That if US doesn't toe the line, India can give more orders to Airbus. If Europe doesn't really agree with India on certain things, India can move it towards Boeing, right? So this is a good thing. I think there is news. So as you said, it's like 470 aircrafts now, option to buy 370 more, as well as there is talks of Indigo also placing a large aircraft order. So I think all this is very good news for the Indian aviation sector. This was particularly hard hit during the years of the pandemic. There were a lot of people who were like either cabin crew or pilots, etc., were grounded, and some of them were even like struggling for daily household expenses or like having to dip into reserves or take loans. There are a lot of media stories about that. So hopefully, this is ensures there's a lot more demand, and we win back a lot of market share from the other airlines competing with us. Another sector, we've signed an FTA with Australia, but there's only one direct flight from Delhi to Sydney. No other Indian city. So probably now we count like the top eight Indian metros and the top four, five big Australian cities. Maybe there is enough business because there are a lot of Indians who live in Australia, and all of them they fly via Singapore, Malaysia, or Thailand, right? So they are all stopping over somewhere. So this is also like some other part where these large aircrafts that they have can come in. And another thing is what the Tata Group has done, and maybe this is just my speculation. People do know that Air India is overstaffed. So there are two ways of addressing your staffing issue. One is you fire a lot of people and cut costs that way, or two is you expand the business so much that the staffing becomes appropriate, right? So maybe they are using the second strategy. Obviously, there will be certain redundancies. There'll be some people, but this makes me quite bullish on the airline and hoping it'll take a few years, but hoping that it gets transformed to like a premium airline where it becomes the first airline of choice to fly, pretty much like the Middle Eastern ones or like Singapore Airlines, etc., where it is said like that's your first choice. Even if it is more expensive, people are willing to pay up the premium. So yeah, good news in that front.
Yeah, I think with this, Tata will completely dominate the domestic aviation market at least, right? And it's really glad. I mean, I'm really glad that Tata is really investing in this for sure. I think in a statement, Mr. N. Chandrasekharan had said, Air India is on a large transformation journey across safety, customer service, technology, engineering, network, and human resources. So, as you said, they're going to expand their business so much that a lot of the folks perhaps who had an easy time before will have to work right now, right? Well, in some geopolitical news, our neighbors China plan to expand their railway network in Tibet across the current 1,400 kilometers to 4,000 kilometers. The railway line linking Xinjiang with Tibet is of particular concern to India. This line will run through the disputed Aksai Chin region and alongside the LAC in Ladakh. This also means that Chinese trains carrying thousands of troops can be deployed swiftly right up to the disputed India China border. Abhishek, this is not a good development from an India perspective, right?
Yeah, obviously, because while publicly China always claims that all its developments of railways and roadways in these border areas are for economic purposes, right? And for example, this particular development is basically to link Tibet and Xinjiang, and it is going through pretty close to the LAC, that is the line of actual control through Aksai Chin. And as we know, like Aksai Chin is the area which we show under our map, right? But it is actually beyond the LAC and in Chinese control since 62 at least, right? So yeah, I mean the Chinese have been sort of well ahead of India on this game of connecting their border areas to their mainlands much more, right? I mean, they have rail stations pretty close to the border on the side on our borders, where about I think 15-16 kilometers from the Arunachal border, and also pretty close on some of the other borders, right? So, on India's part, we have only still talked about getting railways there. There hasn't been any start of any construction by our side. I think over the last few years, what has happened is at least the roadways work has progressed significantly on the Indian side. So we do have now much better roads on our side, but we are still not yet there with in terms of rail connectivity to the border areas. So yeah, of course, this is a development which will concern India quite a bit.
All right, on the domestic front, in politics, on Friday, the Electoral Commission ordered that Eknath Shinde's faction will get the official name of Shiv Sena and keep the bow and arrow as a symbol. The Uddhav Thackeray faction's MP Sanjay Raut said the Election Commission has lost credibility with the order and the Uddhav's faction will now challenge the decision in the court. Nirav, so one would think that the Shiv Sena belonged to the Thackeray's, but then the Electoral Commission, has opined otherwise.
I think, see, first of all, you should say that Shiv Sena was founded by Balasaheb Thackeray, but it is not a family business, right? And even in a family business, sometimes if somebody owns more number of shares, the founding family can be displaced, right? So that is first rule. Second thing is it's a democracy. The party will remain with the people who kind of, so Shiv Sena was a grassroots driven party, driven more by the unions and with a core ideology of Marathi identity, right? And so that is what were like in 1960s when it was founded. That was the core which was kind of like Shiv Sena was formed around. And when Shiv Sena broke coalition with the BJP, joined with the Congress to form MVA, some of the party members felt that this was deviating away from their core. And so that is why Eknath Shinde split. 76% of the party members voted for Eknath Shinde to hold the party symbol and carry on with the party name, and 24% voted for Uddhav. So this is electorally, it is, I think it's a fair thing. Supreme Court or whoever can say, I think, see, nobody has any doubts that Uddhav Thackeray is Balasaheb Thackeray's son and Aditya Thackeray is Balasaheb Thackeray's grandson. So if you want to believe on like a family ideology, family legacy, you can have a separate party and with a separate symbol. And people, if they thought that the most important characteristics is carrying the gene pool of the founder, they will vote for you. Or if people believe that the most important characteristics were around the principles that Shiv Sena was formed, then people will vote for them. See, the thing is, election symbol, etc., is not that big a deal. People really know who's standing for what, and they will vote accordingly. So I don't think it is that big. Maybe there are issues about how the party finances are managed or how is that divided, or there are issues about the Shiv Sena Bhavan, the landmark building in Mumbai, Dadar. So that again, maybe it goes to court. I don't know how does it get divided, etc. Uh, maybe coming from like a private sector finance background, etc. I'm just looking at this as like a disinvestment or like a split between a reverse, so opposite of a merger, right? That this is two companies splitting, and how do you deal with trademarks, right? If you have like a large company splitting into two factions and certain trademarks have to be kept, etc., how do you deal with that, right? So one thing which was done in the interim, both did not use the symbol or the name. You had the Shinde faction was using Bala Sahebanchi Shiv Sena, and Uddhav faction was using Uddhav Balasaheb Thackeray Shiv Sena, right? UBT Shiv Sena. And both had different symbols, right? Because neither could use it, saying that the goodwill created earlier by that symbol or the party name would be taken over by one. But in a democracy, it's where what the people decide, right? And this is like inner party democracy. Eknath Shinde and his team have said that there was no inner party democracy earlier, and it was run as a personal family business. Running a family business is fine as long as you have 100% equity in that business, right? If you are the owner, you are running with 100% equity, that is fine. But this is not a family business, right? It's a political party with a certain ideology, with certain core beliefs, and that is the message you're giving to your voters. So I think that the election commission probably has decided in the correct way. Maybe this goes to a high court or the Supreme Court, and maybe they decide whichever way. But I don't think that it is pretty obvious that if 76% of the party members are voting one way, then I think it should be pretty obvious. And second thing is that after this as well, right? Despite this, finally it is the voters who will decide. So if all the voters feel that Uddhav's Shiv Sena is the one which stands for the values what they were holding earlier, and they want to vote that way, it's fair enough. Or they want to vote with Eknath Shinde, fair enough. I think uh, in a democracy, it's the people who decide. So I think the decision should be left to them. And this is just a big hue and cry made over things. A lot. I think in India, we are having a lot of parties which were very personality driven with one core founder and their families. And now maybe we are going to a level where the second generations are coming up everywhere, and you will have like such factions, you will have such splits. And I think whatever happens here, this is a very public, large. Shiv Sena has 18 MPs, and they have the old combined entity had like 55 or 56 MLAs in Maharashtra out of 288. So it's a fairly large party, and maybe this template will be used in the future for any other such decisions where a party is splitting. So that will also be interesting to see in the future.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting. It's the difference between the family and the cadre, right? In some sense, as you point out. Well, often dubbed the agent of chaos, billionaire George Soros made some controversial remarks in Germany on Thursday. He said that Prime Minister Modi would have to answer questions from foreign investors and the parliament on allegations of fraud and stock manipulation at Gautam Adani's industrial empire. He also said that he expects to see, to quote, a democratic revival in India. Soros has been accused of orchestrating the financial crisis in Asian markets in the late 90s, which led to a lot of turmoil and distress. He's also been accused of funding regime changes across the globe to weaken their systems. Abhishek, he overall, I mean, I don't know what his end goal is, but I mean, this guy seems like his moniker, I mean, an agent of chaos, right? I mean, what is his motive with all of this stuff?
No, I mean, he's pretty well known since the 1970s and 80s that he uses his money to support progressive politics, right? I mean, he's been a huge funder for the Democrats in the US and parties on the left in European elections, etc. So, I mean, I didn't find anything surprising or controversial in what he said. He's basically saying what also every opponent of Modi is thinking and saying right now, right? With regarding the Adani case, that there is a perception that the Adanis are very close to the prime minister, and therefore, if anything goes wrong, then the blowback would sort of come on to the BJP and PM Modi. So, I mean, I thought it was fairly like run of the mill kind of statements. If you see some of his previous remarks, he said in 2020 that the most concerning thing in the world was the rise of or the victory of the BJP basically in 2019. So, I mean, his positions are pretty straightforward. And now it's up to how politics happens in India, right? I mean, in some ways, his statements are a problem for the Congress party and the opposition because it gives an easy sort of ammunition to the BJP to say that, look, you guys are in cahoots with foreign forces and all that. So, I mean, what will happen is pretty simple, sort of regular politics here, and then it's up to like both sides to sort of deal with it. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was like pretty expected that George Soros or people like that will sense an opportunity that this whole Adani situation could be a problem for the
But
BJP.
I think for the first time, it's out in the public, right? I mean, out in the open, including all of the connections and everything.
No, but as I said, like in 2020, if you see, he made a much more, like right now, the statement was pretty simple that Mr. Modi has to answer to investors and the public, which is like not a big deal. I mean, the big statement was in 2020, I would say, where he said that, the most frightening setback in the world is the election of Narendra Modi. Like, that is a much bigger statement than to say, okay, possible financial corruption or fraud is to be answered by the ruling party. So I thought, like, this is a very mild statement to the 2020 statement.
Just adding a bit, right? So one thing is, see, what George Soros is saying is Modi will have to answer investors. So if like there is any particular scam, or we had like the Satyam Maita scam, we've had multiple other things, right? If foreign investors feel this is not worth investing in, they shouldn't. See, India has to obviously try and keep a clean image, and it is for SEBI, the regulators, etc., to look at it, right? Two is it was found that okay, neither is Adani very systemically going to bring it all of India down. It's not as if that it's a company which has like no assets. You have like some Western podcasters comparing it to Sam Bankman Fried and FTX, right? Here you got like a person running ports, airports, power plants, delivering electricity every day. It's a very different way. So that is one thing. Second is, see, George Soros has been funding in his country of birth, even in Hungary. He's been against the current ruling party, right? And he's been very vocal about it, and he's been funding left of center politics everywhere, right? So that is his money, his ideology. But when he's funding a lot of these NGOs, etc., now you need to be a little more careful, right? That who's doing what. And second thing is, India has a history of being colonized. We don't want other people to say what we want. Like Indian people should decide what is good for India. I think that's the most important thing. All these guys who say, "Oh, death of democracy," etc., is when the person they like doesn't get voted. It's not whether the people like they are not to decide, right? India is neither invading any other country. India is neither like trying to force itself or its views on other countries' policy, internal policy. So why should others be interfering in like India's policy? And if anybody has questions, parliamentarians are authorized to ask questions in the parliament. People are authorized to exercise their vote and vote according to whatever they find is important to them. So I think that should stop it there.
Yeah. No, I think the main cause of concern is the external influence, right? And, whether you look at Open Society Foundation or some of the other um, organizations that he funds, I mean, it seems very well entrenched, this whole NGO network, and so on, right? I mean, I think that is really what is concerning. Well, over the past week, IT officials raided BBC's offices in Mumbai and Delhi on account of certain remittances not being disclosed as income in India by the foreign entities of the BBC. Certain sections of the media had a field day criticizing the government for what they alleged as an attack on the free press. Uh, Nirav, what do you make of this?
Okay, so one thing is now you had like the critics of the BJP would say that BBC came out with a documentary about the Modi story, etc., and this is retaliation for that. But now thing number two is that basically you see that there is some allegations if there is of like hiding tax or some remittances which are not being paid for, so that if it is there, let the matter sort itself out. It is for the tax authorities and BBC to sort itself out. The second thing is that the BBC India team need not be the ones which had produced like the Modi documentary, etc. It was all done. A lot of it was done by the team in the UK. Like Jack Straw is one of the presenters. But second thing is that other media houses also need to realize that in a country, like by criticizing the current prime minister, etc., and showing like a little bit biased view, you will have some sort of blowback. And I think this is what it is. I don't really know about the details. If BBC India has done no tax avoidance or nothing, so be it. If there is something, maybe they just pay the penalty tax and move on, right? They pay the tax on whatever was outstanding and pay a penalty and move on. I think it's just everybody is like looking at it from their own viewpoint, and they are trying to like blow it out of proportion. Let it just be where it is, and everybody moves on ahead.
No, the thing is that I often am stumped by this, right? Which is that if you are not compliant, then you have no way to hold a moral position, right? Saying that, hey, I mean, why the raid now or why the raid later or whatever, right? So I think that is the fundamental thing, which is that you are you compliant or not, right? So anyway, well, next week we're going to be putting out an interesting episode with Sumita Kale, Monica Jasuja, and Mandar Kagade. This is a follow up of the fintech episode we recorded maybe a year and a half back. Very wide ranging discussion on financial inclusion, digitization, and so on and so forth. We talk about the innovation and the policy side of things. We'll put this out next week. Do catch this on all of the podcast platforms. That's it from us for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and don't forget to rate and review if you liked the content so more people can discover us. So from Neerav, Abhishek, and myself, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind. See you next week.